Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I don't think we're going to have the voting item tonight, but I'm going to declare a quorum anyway, because we have a quorum. For people who watched on the streaming services last week or in the interim, you'll know that this is our follow-on from our first full budget workshop where we looked at a draft of the full budget. Our school board members have in their hands the presentation from last time, which was the draft budget plus the draft line item budget, which was just amazing reading material. I know I spent very many hours with it. And what we are doing tonight is following up on those parking lot questions that came up in the last meeting. We're going to try to address as many of them as we can. I reserve the right to hold another workshop in the future if we feel as though we just have not had enough time to discuss those parking lot questions. So any questions on procedure or where we are in the process? All right, seeing none, I know Craig, the administrative staff, has put together a presentation for us. Everybody has this new presentation in their email if you want to look at it on your laptop instead of on the screen ahead of us. Give you a second to pull that up if you want to. And otherwise, why don't you take it away, Greg?
Okay, so the administrative team.
Who's the advancer of this thing over here?
Oh, that.
Oh, there we go. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim.
Welcome.
The administrative team met yesterday for about 3.5 hours and spent all our time working on this. And then Diane and I and Shanda have spent a good amount of time working on this. Diane probably was the most intense in the homework on the parking lot questions. But we think we're going to take turns on the slides. The items we're going to talk about today are listed here. Clarifications from the 320, pardon me? No, I'm on slide. Clarifications from the 320 presentation. And then we have the parking lot questions for salaries, the existing salaries, any new salaries, or ESSER salaries. There was a decision that you wanted to see the 3 separate columns so you could parse them out. Plans for the remaining ESSER funds. There was about $250,000 left off that we can use, and there is a plan for that. How do the sidewalks in the town, the joint project fit in? School resource officer request. Administration increased priorities, the fund balance history, things that will still need to be determined, and then identify areas for further reductions and then board discussion. So that's a full night. We tried to do as much homework as we could without overstepping our boundaries onto board decisions.
Can I add quickly to that, Greg? In that we were going over earlier, making sure that we attacked all of the parking lot questions. And I think we forgot to add a bullet for special ed. We were talking about getting like
That is on our identified areas. That is on a slide of stuff.
okay.
More time.
I was just making sure that we didn't leave it off our list.
And I'm prepared to do a presentation on our district tonight, if that, if you want me to. 5 slides.
Okay, next,
I just want to make sure we don't leave that off here.
yeah. Next slide. And Special Education Assistant Director, point 5, gave a little misinformation or incorrect information last time. We thought that at the time of the board decision to expand, and by the time it got to the board to vote on whether or not to have the position funded, It was funded in the old budget. That's not what we were told you last week. It was funded 0.5, so what the add is, the actual ask for increase is 0.5, not 1.0. And there is an additional 1.0 full-time special services teacher for high school gateway that is in the 25 budget. But I think that might be part of your explanation.
No, just talk about out of district.
Out of history, okay.
The 0.5 thing was in the budget, right? In the actual
Correct.
75 page thing. Okay, that's what I thought.
And then, so here on the salaries, next slide, please. So this is the 3 columns that was requested last week. So the existing salaries, first column, that's for all the people we've had for a year or more. The new is the ask that we are, is just brand new that we're asking for. And the new from the ESSER comes from the positions that had been funded by ESSER for 3 years, but are now need to be funded either by the local budget or by other ways.
Can you explain that a little more clearer?
Okay, go back over.
So the,
Existing salaries right now, 27, new ones are 399.
yeah, so your total budget is about 80, I think it's 82.8% is existing salaries and benefits. That's almost, your whole budget is almost entirely people. So salaries and budgets of everyone that works here is $27,302,652. There is an ask for some new positions that are in the proposal you received, and that comes out to $399,369 for salaries and benefits. And then the third column is jobs that had been paid for 3 years by the ESSER grant that are in the budget for the upcoming year that would need to be funded either locally or by other sources.
Or eliminated. Or eliminated,
Or eliminated.
right?
So you total those last 2 columns up as far as new positions go? Is
That would, I believe that would give me yes.
Except for the new from ESSER, is it, those people are in the building, so to speak. Those people exist.
Correct.
And the 20, just to be crystal clear, the 27 million does not include the 2 columns to the right.
Correct.
So if you add those all up, you get, basically 28.2.
So the ask last week was, what's the salary of these people? But that only tells about 70% of the story. We added in Social Security, Main State Retirement, health insurance, dental insurance, all the benefits that they're, so to actually hire a new person or remove a new person is a lot more than just salary. Next slide, please. Okay. As you can see clearly,
The reason we started with that one, this is the detail.
That's why we have it on our.
This is the detail,
Yeah.
that's why you have it.
Diane, I'll let you go through this slide a little bit, and
Yep, so these are the positions that are existing, like Craig said, the first column is the existing salary and benefits, and then the next column is the new that have been requested, that would be paid out of local funds, which are the Ed Tech 2 for Gateway at Dunn School, the Ed Tech 2 Gateway at the high school, the teacher, the Gateway program at the high school, a van driver for special ed, the business manager, which includes a reduction from savings from positions that we're paying for Jeff and that we're paying Tom to support that business manager that we currently have. Also the additional 0.5 for special ed director, the attendance secretary, additional time, and esports, and the additional for IT cyber support. So that's what makes up the $399,000. Then the positions, the new positions for ESSER are the permanent substitutes in 4 of the schools, Russell Memorial Middle School and High School, the Ed Tech 3 for kindergarten support at both Russell and Memorial School, and then the social workers for general ed at all 5 schools, as well as the building-based IEP stipends that make up the $438,000.
If you refer to the presentation from last week, as we went through those slides, and these are the additions, it should match fairly one-to-one once you take in the clarifications we gave in the slide first.
Yeah, so this includes the gateway teacher from a high school that was missing and corrects the special ed assistant director.
So I just want to reiterate the business manager. It's not that we are cutting the pay of the business manager, we're just reflecting the new spend differently in that hiring the business manager allows us to remove a couple of stipends. So the net gain is less than the 115 we were presenting with the position. Just want to make sure that's clear.
Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the plan for the remaining ESSER funds. Most of them are instructional related, so I'm going to go over to Shanda.
So Diane and I, and Diane mostly, but I sit with her and encourage her, I hope. Have spent a lot of time figuring out what our costs are gonna be through the end of these funds. And we think we have about 195,000 that we could reallocate from the original plan to try to alleviate some of the challenges in the coming year budget. Some of those things we identified, there are certain parts of the curriculum materials purchases that would be allowable under ESSER, so we could move some of those funds into ESSER. We can't move all of it, but we can move some of it. So those are ELA programs at the middle school, math materials at the middle school, and then it was not an addition on your list because it is an existing program at the middle school, but we do need to extend our current math license for 1 more year. And that is something we can pay for most of it out of ESSER, we believe. The other thing we're exploring is there's a category within ESSER funding for IDEA activities, so individuals with disabilities in Education Act. I'm staring at Holly to bail me out, but I think I got it right. And so we are exploring how we might be able to transfer some of those costs to alleviate a little bit in next year's budget and move some of that into our ESSER funds.
No. And so, like Chanda said, it's allowable expenses. It's not just everything that we can just go ahead and transfer whatever we'd like, and we'd have to get approval. So we're estimating that we could. There are things that they may say, nope, you can't use that for it. And also it has to be things that we would purchase or use before September 30th of 2024. So whatever we anticipate trying to use and trying to rewrite the grant is at best questionable, that we'll try to get whatever we can through as soon as possible so we know whether it's an allowable expense, but.
We're pretty good at it.
Yeah.
But we're pretty good at it. I'm fairly confident that we can do this.
So say you guys were 100% successful, this would represent $195,000 reduction in the draft we saw last week.
That's what we'd like to do.
Assuming best
Yeah.
case scenario.
That would be
Just
the
making
scenario,
sure I
yeah.
understand.
That would be the plan.
Yep, okay.
Keep going.
And next slide, please.
So sidewalks, the question came up about sidewalks. So we had appropriated and allocated 25,000, the commitment from the school committee was 50,000 towards that grant if it was awarded to the town of Gray. Last year, we allocated year-end funds of $25,000. We are sitting with a PO. I spoke to the town manager. They're all set to accept that $25,000. My recommendation will be to use an additional $25,000 of this year-end funds to do that, and send that to them, and they're ready to accept that. So we'll be all set. We will have that additional $25,000 to do that this year.
Any questions about that? Go ahead, Fran.
How's that related to the bonds?
I'm
For the
sorry?
sidewalks, how's that relating to the bonds? the bond for the sidewalk, proposal.
This has nothing to do with, this is the grant that, the federal grant that the town of Gray
For
got
sidewalks,
for sidewalks.
but potentially there's a bond for commitment of, that money that came in from, the federal government.
No, so there is no bond requirement for the federal government, right? So,
No, there's no bond level, I'm sorry, I mixed up my things, but there's still, money coming in from the federal government as well, so,
not as well, that's what we're talking about right now. So,
okay.
you remember when Susan Collins came to your Republican meeting and said, awesome news, I got these sidewalks?
Right. That
This is
was
what we're
50,000.
talking about.
Right,
We gotta
This is
give
the
them 50
school.
grand, we've already given them 25, Diane believes we'll have 25 left over in the current year's budget to write a PO to the town.
all right, you just came in a different way, that's why I was a little confused, I'm all set. Okay, thanks.
Next slide, please.
So,
So the school resource officer is broached almost every year. And this year it was, received a little more attention last week because there is a cost, there is the purchase of a new vehicle, there is a breakdown of expenses. This is a service that we pay for from the county. And we pay for we pay for the number of student days. So whatever the number of student days is, and what it costs per day, we pay the salary and benefits of the officer, as well as the formula for the vehicle. And so this is sort of the breakdown of what it costs for us to have a school resource officer. And the school resource officer comes with a vehicle. They're one and the same, they're not broken down.
So this,
Go ahead.
so this year, this varies depending on, we get a contract every year. It depends on who the person is and what salary and benefits that person is allocated to. So the personnel costs and salary benefits this year happen to be $122,822. Supervision, insurance, and professional liability is $3,800. Then there's operational costs for uniforms, tires, training, equipment, a taser, cell phone, things like that, a little over $5,000. Capital costs for the new vehicle, and then to fit up the new vehicle is $72,000. So that's a little over $203,000. The breakdown is the town of Gray gets it for 14 weeks or 27%, and the school department gets it for 38 weeks or 73%. So our share is just under $150,000, $148,818 is our share. And we break it down between 50-50 of high school, middle school. So in years where we do not have, we would only have that vehicle for 1 year. They purchase it outright, don't lease it or anything, so it'd be a 1-year cost, so next year we'd have a savings of 73% of the $72,000. Unfortunately, there's no buyout of the existing, that would be the only thing that I'd ask, is if there's a buyout of the existing vehicle, what's happening to that past. I know the town has said that they wanted to purchase the vehicle, the existing vehicle, and if they did that, they would have to pay us for whatever value of the vehicle is worth. They couldn't just buy it from them and not pay us any money.
That 72,000 for that vehicle, is that just the district's share?
No, that's the entire, this is the entire budget for the school resource officer, for the resource officer, split between the town and the
I
school.
see it, okay.
This is the entire budget cost.
73% of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Gary. Diane, you just said that the costs are split between the middle school and high school. So is the assumption made that the officer only serves middle school and high school?
No, it's just that's how we break it down and we share it at the guidance office. It's just how we budget it. But I believe the services are throughout district-wide. There's really no benefit because it's guidance services all one article. for our budgeting purposes. Guidance is one article, it's not necessarily a different article, so it's all funded the same, it's not a separate funding in the ED 279.
So I think just clarifying questions while we're going through the presentation, and then we can have full discussion later on for those points we want to dive deeper into. But any other clarifying questions on this? We haven't seen the numbers broken down like this in a while, so this is really helpful.
And I have a copy of the bigger contract, if someone's really interested in seeing that, I can certainly get that to them.
Excuse me, is that an annual contract?
Yes.
All right, let's keep going.
Okay, so the next piece is, there was an ask from the board that we make a priority, and that's a priority list, and that's a lot of what we worked on during the intervening week. And we broke it down into 4 categories. Increases we cannot influence or cannot influence without eliminating established opportunities. Increases critical to meeting vision and mission. Increase less critical to meeting the vision and the mission. And then increases least critical to the meeting of the mission and the vision. So the next 4 slides, in order of importance. First slide will be the most important priority, or things that we really can't control. You know, if Anthem says this is the cost of the premium, that's the cost of the premium. The second slide are things that we can control, but we think are very important, then lesser important, and then least important. Okay, why don't you go ahead, Diane, and work through the first slide.
Okay, so we're sort of identifying things, we were talking about it, like things we really don't control. So I think a great example here is the athletics officials. That fee is going up. We have no say in that. Our choice is to not have athletics. So that's our point around eliminating established opportunities. If we wanted to impact that number, we would have to have bigger conversations about eliminating either entire sports or entire programs. We can't control when transportation costs that, you know, are fluctuating in the regular market. So the audit, that's what it's going to cost. We don't have the opportunity to reduce that. We have to do an audit. So we thought it was really important to put these things out. And then that last bullet I think is really important, which is the out of district placement. That can be a super big wild card, and it's something we don't control. If a child needs an outside placement and that is what's in their IEP, we have to provide it. But we don't get to decide how much it costs. We can't say that's too expensive, we won't send you there. We don't have a say in that. That is federal law. We would be in violation of federal law otherwise. So that's really, of course, always scary for us, because you can see really big swings if a few kids move in or a few kids move out. So it's always sort of a wild card we're trying to plan for, and making sure we're utilizing as much of our different funding sources as possible to buffer that. But at the end of the day, that's not something we can put on a list because we are required to do it by federal law.
Okay, so on the next slide.
Just on
Yep.
facilities increases, I don't think you mentioned what is that? What does it consist of?
Facility increases could be if we needed to replace a snow plow or something like that. You know, if there's equipment that needs repair or something that we cannot do without, or infrastructure for water or heating oil or things like that.
Gas.
Instead of, you know, electricity, which we happen to have a reduction this year in because of our solar use, but things like that, we don't. And transportation increases, you know, we need increases for the repair of buses. You know, that is all going up, and we cannot not repair our buses.
These items.
We have a question.
Sorry.
Are we billing Medicaid for any special services, and do you have any idea how much that is?
We are billing wherever we can, and the state's trying really hard to make it easier for us to do that.
It's not
We
easy.
haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen it happen. I think we get under $2,000 a year back in Medicaid at this point. We should be getting a lot more, and I know we're really trying, and they're doing a lot of, work around that. Haven't seen it yet. Yeah, it's really a shame.
I will say that these bullets generally are pulled directly from the slides you received last week, so if you're looking for more detail about what a specific bullet means, if you go back to that last presentation, you should be able to one-to-one find the information.
Okay, on the next slide, increase is critical to meeting the vision and the mission of the school. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to have kids teach. We're all about teaching and learning. Kids learning math, kids learning to read, kids being ready to graduate to go to the world of work or college or military. So these are just fundamental that at least the admin team all agree that these are really necessary for us to move the mission of the school forward. And
again, these one-to-one back to those slides from last week.
so the general education social workers is something that the admin team has really brought to the forefront. It is one of the ESSER pieces. It was paid for 3 years by ESSER. It had been identified as a need prior to the pandemic. And I guess the way I would view this one is sometimes our reality changes, and prior to the pandemic, you probably could have made a good argument that we really don't need those general education social workers. But then the pandemic happened, and that really wreaked havoc on a lot of people's lives, on a lot of young people's lives. And now that the pandemic's over, it's been over for a while, what we're finding is there are a lot of kids and there are a lot of families who don't have an IEP, who are in general education, and really need those services. And we have not been able to meet those services. So this is clearly, of all the things from the ESSER, if they could keep, if we could keep, we believe is necessary. Curriculum materials, we need those materials to teach math and English. Technology is the way kids function in society today. It's how a lot of teaching and learning takes place. Their library research takes place through the technology. Cybersecurity, absolutely necessary. Keeping the student data safe, keeping the school district data safe. Ransomware is very real. School districts have been held hostage. And we hear horror stories all the time about large institutions in the state of Maine being hacked, and so we feel that that's fundamental to keep important. The music equipment, if we're going to have a music, they're on a rotation for music instruments. Special services instructional supply, that's key to our mission. The ed tech at Dunn, key to our mission. Athletic supplies, if we're going to have a co-curricular athletic program, it's key to the mission. And then the business manager is a new ask. And frankly, we've done a lot of research on this. The personnel committee's been working on this for over, I'd say, well, in earnest since at least last August, maybe before that, is the our fiduciary responsibilities, the size of our budget, the amount of work that needs to be done for the day-to-day operations of the budget and payroll, and accounts payable, and making sure that as an institution that we are operating at the highest level in terms of accounting practices and business practices. In addition to that, we also expect a high degree of services to support transportation, food service, facilities, food service, keeping the grounds mowed and plowed. And unfortunately, over the last few years, we've had more problems with some of those areas. And so by providing a business manager that allows us to have our director of operations more time in the field, in the cafeterias, in the bus garage, in the buildings and grounds, making sure that the services we provide our kids and families is operating at the best possible level. And when problems happen, they don't fester for 6 months or fester for a year, that they get some problem solving attention.
Also, just the reminder that allows us to eliminate a couple of stipended positions, frees up Jeff to actually be the principal of Dunn without having to oversight role facilities and transportation. But I won't editorialize anymore, just.
And then these increases, they are important to meeting the vision and mission of the district, but if you were to ask us in priority, this would be a secondary priority than the list I just shared with you. Shanda, I'll let you take this one, we'll talk about it.
I'm so excited. So the permanent subs, which I did put 5 on this slide because I forgot that Dunn hadn't asked for one, but so my mistake. But permanent subs, those have filled a huge need, particularly around our intervention programs. We are not having to take staff from really important programs to have them sub. Having someone we can place is key. Having recently filled in for a number of our principals in this district, I will tell you the 6 a.m. conversation is who is out, who is not covered, and what are the 6 places we can put the permanent sub. They were just absolutely crucial. But in the scheme of things, the last list we think is a little more important. The assistant director 0.5 addition we've talked quite a bit about. Pre-K technology refresh, we do have pre-K on our original plan that we shared with you to have a refresh. Out of all the kiddos in the district, they use theirs the least. The challenge with that is they have the oldest devices in the district, so if we weren't to do it, it's still going to be a problem pretty soon. It would be a very sort of short-term fix. But we just sort of wanted to note that we feel that the K-12 is really critical. The pre-K is maybe a little less critical. The special services building-based coordinators, again, they're pretty important, but they're a little less critical. And same is true for the kindergarten ed tech 3s at Memorial School and Russell School.
Okay. On the 4th slide of priorities, these have what we came up with as the least critical. Special services teacher for the high school Gateway. For those of you that don't know what Gateway is, that's students with behavioral challenges that require special instruction and small class size. So special services building-based coordinator, 1 additional stipend for a total of 5. That is something that is on the lower priority. High school attendance secretary, we have been really working hard to improve student attendance, and the attendance secretary has been doing a good job in contacting families and giving us good data, but we think there are ways we can do without that. Team Snap, an alternative way to communicating with families and students about athletics, a little more secure. We feel that can come off the list. And so those are our priority list, those four pages.
With the priority that the state is putting on the chronic attendee issue, are we in jeopardy of losing any state funding, like are there penalties associated with that?
Not now. And,
Not yet.
and
Yeah, but there isn't right now.
yeah. As disappointing as the reports that given to you on attendance, we're not a red flag for the state. We're doing better than many of our colleagues. This is a chronic state financial problem.
Do you have
To that end, this small piece that is working on addressing a major issue, that dollar value was literally like $6,000, right?
It was 1,600.
Over the, out of the whole budget.
Right.
And the same with the athletics thing that allows adults that we don't want in direct private contact with students, a safe way to communicate was something like $2,000 for the entire budget year, right?
Right.
So this is, all right, I'm taking that.
That's for the priorities, they gave you the
Yeah.
priorities.
I just want to make sure that we don't, moving into opinion.
That's right. I'm not sure that was a clarifying question.
I was writing a line.
So,
It's very small.
it is very small, but if you can find $3,000 in 22 places.
Or if you cut $3,000, it's really, really useful.
You asked the administration to prioritize it.
I'm not saying we didn't.
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking along the same lines is that it'd be helpful if there was some kind of order of magnitude or percentage of the increase on these various things, so you can look at a line item and kind of know, okay, that's a $2,000 item, it's not,
They were all, they're
you know, I
they're
don't,
in the last presentation we got, so if you cross-references, went to that one.
so when you look at the critical ones and think, what does that represent? Is that 55% of the increases, and then the next one is 35, and then the next one is 50?
And unfortunately, in some of the positions, if you cut some of the positions, it actually won't be those people. So those will not be the people that will be ripped, it will be other people. So that dollar figure will not necessarily be that dollar figure.
That's what I was thinking.
So for
just rough
example.
percentage.
Yeah, for example, if you were to
For
cut
example.
an Ed Tech 3 from ESSER, it will not be that person. So your savings, you may think you're gonna save $50,000, you may actually only be saving 30 because you're gonna be cutting the newest person, the newest Ed Tech 3. And that person is gonna maintain their job, they're just gonna have a different job because they're not the lowest person on the total bill.
I work in a union environment, get back to that.
Yeah, so it's just, unfortunately, I don't know who it will be, and I don't know that you'll be cutting them, so I can't give you that information.
We do have dollar amounts for all of these things.
Yeah, you do in that, yeah.
Priorities, either earlier in this presentation or last.
And what I would do is I'd make a list and then present you with a new list.
Okay.
They have, on attendance,
Yep,
the secretary, how many hours is that position?
Right now,
Yeah,
I believe it is 4 hours, and they're asking for 6 hours a day. It's a school year position, it's not a full year position.
so out of the presses, I got down from MSMA, I guess. I find concerning because if you're looking at the future, or next year even, it says the emphasis is going to shift from rules and administration enforcement to recognizing the impact of missed days and prevention, intervention, and all that. The underlying problems for absenteeism, working with families and communities for solutions. Does that mean that, almost sounds like to me, that's new positions that's being advocated, another way of looking at things? That's right. Have you shifted from that already, from the rules and enforcement, administrative enforcement, have you shifted from that already? Or if you do have that enforced, you'll be shifting for the future? And if that's the case, to me, it sounds like lingo for a new position or two.
More than 5 years
Yeah.
ago now, as part of our strategic plan work, we did work of exactly what you're talking about. So that work around addressing the underlying issues of absenteeism, we have been doing in our schools with distinct, direct, purposeful focus since before the pandemic. So I would say we're well on our way with that, and as we identify more needs like here, it's in response to exactly that. How do we make sure we're getting rid of those barriers to help ensure children can come to school as much as possible?
Good clarification, thank you.
Okay, so there was discussion of the fund balance, over what the fund balance has been, over the last 10 years. I'll have Diane go through it. There is school districts should have a fund balance, for emergencies. And, but because of our inability to fill many positions, we've had an artificially high fund balance. And my editorial is, yes, we need to keep in our hip pocket that that is a good source for revenue. It's a good source to think about funding the budget, but I wouldn't want it to convolute the work that we're doing tonight. So yes, we know that this can have a positive impact in reducing the increase by, which in turn is returning dollars, taxpayer dollars, to the taxpayers. And so I believe the Finance Committee is, traditionally has worked on this in developing a recommendation to the board on what level of fund balance should be directed toward the revenue side, and then maybe what direction or what part of the fund balance may be directed towards
Capital Reserve Fund, or, you know, we actually now have the ability to, and it's something we considered last year and, you know, not doing it, we have, thanks to new law, the ability to create other designated funds. So the same way that we have a Capital Reserve Fund, we could create, for instance, like last year we thought about creating a Technology Reserve Fund because we knew that the refresh was coming. So we thought instead of rolling over 1.3 million, maybe we would put $500,000 in a Technology Reserve Fund, so that this year we could cash that out and put it towards next year's budget. We ended up deciding not to do that and just doing the 1.327. Mostly, I wanted this slide not to, you know, have the discussion for how much we're going to roll over this year, but I want us to understand what our fund balance and the carryover are for people who are new to the budget process, right? So the fund balance is the amount of money when our fiscal year closes that we have in the bank. And we have, remember the audit presentation we got, you know, it used to be state law, you couldn't have more than 3% of your operating budget in that fund balance. During the pandemic, they got rid of that rule. Now they've brought it back to 9%, and then it will start to move down, I think 2027, it ends up at 5 or something like that.
It's gonna stabilize at 5.
Yeah, so it's gonna stabilize at 5. So, you know, we have currently, that's what our auditor told us, we're over that 9% threshold right now.
Don't forget, our salaries have to come out of this. So
Salaries
we are
have to-
not that much further than where we need to be. Because if we were to close tomorrow, we have to be able to pay all our teachers' salaries off on us.
Right.
So,
I'm mostly saying that at the end of that audit year, at the end of 2023, we're over that 9%. As people can see, we've already come down. We've already spent against our
Yeah.
general
right,
fund,
right, yeah,
is what I was trying
right,
to
we're
get to.
using $1,327,000 of that for this year.
Right,
Yeah.
and so, you know, if we are already addressing it, it is already coming down, but, you know, you can see that we have been kind of all over the place depending on a number of factors. 2017, that was a difficult year. You know, we put a little bit more, then we put a little, you know, it goes around depending on the unfilled positions, but also depending on,
Well, you can see the COVID year
yeah,
where it really bumped up.
that's, you know, that's where it really jumped, is because we were able, A, we had a bunch more unfilled positions, and B, we had a bunch of
We were
federal
close.
money. that we
We were
get. We didn't-
close. We were close.
Yeah, you don't spend any money when you're not driving any buses because you're closed. When you're hybrid, we spend way less on facilities, whatever it is. So I want to make sure that we have a look at this, and what, you know, we have rolled over that between 1.1 million, 1.3 million for 5-6 years in a row. Are we going to do a little bit more than that? Is it going to be about the same? You know, there's some in there. You know, we always talk about the expenses first, then the revenues, right? But I want us to have an idea. We can talk about the E-279, so we have an idea. We know we're getting a little bit more from the state this year. You know, looks like we should be able to continue at least with the 1.3 million. There's no impending cliff or anything like that.
Yeah.
I also just want to make sure nobody had any questions when we hear those terms like carryover or fund balance or any of that sort of thing. You know, we had an auditor tell us, hey, we're over that 9%. I want to make sure we all know what we're talking about. Any questions on that process?
Because this is showing too that we should end the year with a little over $1 million to add to that, so that's why I'm saying it. You know, June 30th, I anticipate having 5.3 million at the end of this year. So, you know, like you said, we have some choices to make as far as offsetting and using it to reduce taxes for this 24-25 year, maybe putting some towards capital reserve in anticipation of asking the community to use some of our capital reserve to offset a bond, maybe put $1 million towards a bond, because we have $1.4 million in a bond right in our capital reserve right now. So those are things that the finance committee should really look at, like what are our pockets that we want to really put some of those monies into, and not necessarily put it all towards our regular operating budget, but what are those funds that will really make a big impact on asks that we're going to do to the community, and be really thoughtful about how to use these monies. You know, 5 million is a lot to have in the capital and the general fund. What do we want to have in our fund balance? You know, kind of back into it. What's a good number? Is a 4 million fund balance a really good number? You know, we want to have a safe cash flow number. You know, we need to be able to balance our books and pay our bills and not have to worry about, you know, can we pay our health insurance this month? You know, we don't want to have to worry about that. So what is that number that we can back into and be able to do that, but also be able to feel good to the community that we're not saving their tax funds and, you know, taxing them unnecessarily. You know, what does that look like? So we really need to make some good decisions around that. And now we got an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and so to pile onto that, last year we moved the 1.327 as a carryover, but then we also put 500,000 in our capital reserve. So that was a way to try to draw it down a little bit, but not do it all into the operating budget, have some of it be setting away later. And I know people know this, but just to say it out loud, what we don't want to do is use carryover money to the point where we don't have that revenue for next year, so that $1 million budget increase becomes a $3 million budget gap because we don't have that 1.3 million to roll over it, right? So, you know, as you can see, 82% are salaries. Those salaries are going to be there next year. We don't want to cover that salary with one-time revenue that we're not going to be able to rely on next year. Any other questions on that? I just want to make sure we're all on the same page when we use that terminology.
Philosophically, when we build a budget as administrators, I think as superintendent, it's really important that that fund balance isn't on the table. When we come to you with a job that we need, or an expense that we need, or a purchase that we need, I can't say, well, we got a big fund balance, let's go for it. No, that priority list is a priority list broken into 4, and that's what it is. Now we can talk about the revenue side. And, it sort of keeps it more pristine and more. Yeah. Okay, so, and I believe this is already on the finance committee agenda next week.
In 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Next slide, please.
So things still to be determined. We're waiting for health insurance. Unfortunately, that won't be coming through until April 10th. We did get some ranges, anywhere from 1.5% to 11.5%, which is unheard of in the last umpteen years. It's never been a range of 10%. We haven't seen dental rates yet. Paid family medical leave law, we still, they said this spring we'll have confirmation. Right now it's going to be 0.25% starting in January, or 0.5%, sorry, from the employer and the employee starting in January of 2025. And liability insurance is out to bid this spring, so we don't have any good information on that. So hopefully as the next few weeks progress, we'll have a lot more information. I'm not feeling real confident about health insurance, unfortunately, at this time, but we'll wait and see.
Right now, the number we have in for health insurance is 10%.
On the paid family medical leave, I believe you put a placeholder.
I did put a placeholder.
161,000.
I have 55,000.
55,000.
Which is a 0.25% for the whole year, thinking that it's going to be 50% starting January 2025.
And you think that placeholder is realistic?
Yes. It's in contingency, so if you see a number in contingency, the budget's, I've redone the budget at this point with new salaries for new collective bargaining agreements.
We haven't even told the whole board about the new so
Next week.
next week.
Next slide, please. And so, Diane does a lot of back office work with our vendors, with contractors, with bids, and so she has gone and done a lot of work to look at that. I'll let her go through some of the cuts she's able to make.
So these are areas that Diane and I in particular are digging into. The first one is courses. We have underspent in courses over the last few years. The challenge with that is courses are part of our collective bargaining agreements. So even if we hit our budget max, if someone wants to use that benefit in their contract, we can't say no, and we have to find the money elsewhere. So we play this guessing game every year of how many people we think in our staff are going to take advantage of that benefit, and we budget accordingly. We are fairly underspent this year so far. We were fairly underspent last year too. So what we're kind of trying to do is dig in and figure out, can we reduce that budget a little bit based on past practice? Same with professional development. We've got some opportunities where we think we can do it differently, or we can move it out to title grant or someplace else, so we could reduce there as well. And while I'm talking, I just said. Yeah, so the professional development, we noted some specific folks we have contracted with in the past. We don't intend to contract with them next year, so we're looking at potentially taking that out. Memorial and Russell School came forward with that, so they should definitely get some credit there. But we do have some room and some other funding to do some work for them if we decide we need to. Skipping down, just because it comes from my perspective, the curriculum materials, as we mentioned earlier, we're looking at wherever we can, moving that into grants. So for example, what would have been in the budget would have been an ELA investment for Dunn School, but the state opened up a literacy grant not long ago, and we were able to cover that 100% out of that grant, so it did not have to come onto our local. So we're continuing to work through that to find places where we can fund those things we know we critically need without it hitting the local taxpayer.
We're gonna be working on what the capital improvements look like. There's still some money this year in capital improvements, so we certainly have to do the central office stairs, some dumb work, and then some driveway work we certainly need to do. So we'll be working this week to figure out exactly what we need to do and maximize that. So I do think we'll be able to reduce the budget for next year. So we'll use some of the rest of this year and use try to reduce it by half next year. There's some E-rate money that we have that we'll bring to finance to discuss, that we have over 100,000 in E-rate, so I'd really like to use some of that to offset the technology for the next 2 years to offset that. Equipment and furniture, maximize this year's funds. The bus purchase, we have 2 new buses that are 2024, so I really think that we can not do a bus purchase next year. We were supposed to purchase a van this year. We cannot purchase, they're not making that size van this year. We're really trying to figure out what we do for vans. We can't, under the law, buy anything that's more than a 7-passenger van, so I'm not really sure what we're gonna do to transport special ed students. We're really in a conundrum right now, so hopefully we can still purchase a van. We'll figure it out. Substitutes, I think, even with the permanent subs, I think we can reduce our sub budget, so I'm really analyzing that, as well as staff travel. So those things, I think there'll be a significant reduction for those areas. And then the next area, things that, parking lot questions that we are still looking at bringing you answers to. I know that Craig sent something out earlier on the IB.
That was before we made this slide.
Yeah. I think he sent something out already. Staff absenteeism.
I think just to elaborate on that one, so I think Fran, you had asked the question around the permanent subs around what is our regular absenteeism? And we can kind of say off the cuff, like, well, it's 30 to 40 people on your average day. Here's the problem with that. When we pull data from our system, it's looking at every single employee in the system every single day of the school year. And that's not really an accurate view of the problem we're trying to solve with permanent subs. The more accurate data is to pull the number of teachers and ed techs, because those are the people we're trying to, you don't care that Diane and I are out. No, there's not a permanent, not a sub coming in and doing the budget for the day for Diane. So looking at who really are the people and pulling out those are the people we use subs for, and how many of those folks are out every day, every school day, because again, when it's professional development day, like it's not, that doesn't get at the permanent sub issue, right? So on the school day, teachers and ed tech specifically, but then additionally to share with you, we have data that shows this number of those positions were filled, meaning we had a sub that came in for that position, and these number went unfilled. And those are the number of people that we had to supplant someone from somewhere else in the school to cover. So we could just pull a figure for you. I don't think it actually gives you the information that you want. To get at that information, it's just gonna take us a little bit longer because it's pretty complicated.
I mean, I can tell you right now, today I had 53 employees out, or that includes some open positions. Tomorrow I have 32, the next day I have 27. The next business right now I have 20. I mean, that's not people who call in on that day. Those are pre-planned already. Absenteeism has been crazy.
You said that
Absolutely crazy.
But that's that.
And these are ones that are planned ahead of time. These are not people that are calling on that day.
You said unfilled positions.
Some of them include unfilled positions, so if that's already accounted for in the system. So it's absolutely ridiculous. The other day it was 60. It blows our mind every morning when I look at it. So.
That doesn't really help much, because if 50% are teachers and ed techs, that would mean, you know, that's still a lot. You can't find enough subs to cover those positions, whether they're advanced or on the spot or anything like that. So there's something wrong with this.
It's everywhere.
You know, again, you know, they're worrying about student absenteeism, and yet we have rampant staffing absenteeism, which is not a good sign or an example for students. So how much of that, I think what you're saying in my mind, but it's limited, but I would think if Joe Schmo calls and it's a teacher, you'd have a column that says teacher and check it.
We do.
Well, then we should know how many teachers each
Yeah,
day.
I'm just saying, I can do it, I can run reports, I don't have
It's
it
just
right at
gonna
my
take us a little longer,
fingertips.
right? So we did all of this in the last 7 days. What we're saying to you is to get that answer that you want in a specific and really meaningful answer, we need a little bit more time.
I have no problem, but.
That's all.
And it's not just us, is what I'm saying, it's not just our school district, it's
So is there any
nationwide.
recommendations to the board of, you know, what the board would do, or is it just an administration problem and the board really?
I would really
Just
encourage us
inform.
maybe not to start jumping to what the problems might be until we're able to give you that more realistic data. Because, you know, when you're talking about these absentees, you're talking about everything. So I'm not sure that we care as much that the district-wide facilities person took a vacation day today, right? I mean, that's not what I would call a problem. So that's why we're saying, we're gonna come back to you with this. We just need some more time to get you really accurate data so you can get to the questions that you're asking.
From a managerial perspective, is there something you can do with your systems to make it a little bit more of a tool, a managerial tool? So you're culling out open positions? 'Cause
No,
that
we
just-
do,
that just clutters up the data.
we can do that, we look at it, we can look at it that way, I just didn't give it to you
And
that
just,
way.
you know, like the positions
We have the
that
capacity to
affect
do
the
that.
operation of the school, the index of the teachers, I understand.
Yeah, so when
Do it.
someone logs in the morning, so when Danny, you're my sideline, sorry, when Danny logs in the morning, he sees Russell School, and immediately at the top, there are 3 bars. And it's positions that are out, that are filled, positions that are out that don't need to be filled, so like if Danny's out, we don't replace them, or I go over there, but we don't put it in, right? People that don't need to be filled, and then a list of unfilled positions. And then it's listed that way by category. So you've got ed techs, you've got teachers, and then you can sort it 20 ways to Sunday, however you want to see it. But immediately every morning, and there was a long period of time where I was doing it every morning at 5 a.m. I'm pulling it up, and we
We see the
different.
entire
We
district,
see
that's
the
why
entire
I'm
district.
looking at the whole thing.
Yeah, so immediately we're seeing 3 bars, which is one is the people that are out that we have subs in for them, the people that are out that don't have to be filled, and then the people that are out that we have unfilled. And it's that unfilled category I think we really hone in on every day to look at, okay, so now that's the problem.
I think that's what we're most interested in, because that affects operations. I mean, we have, is it like 10
Exactly.
people on any given day that you've got to scramble to find some
Unfilled
coverage
position.
for?
And it's double the cost to the taxpayer because you're paying for the substitute.
The reason that this bullet is on the slide labeled parking lot questions still in progress is that they
Yeah.
don't feel like they have the answers available. So let's let them.
The answers
fill that
exist,
bullet
the
point
system
out.
can give it to us, there are just only so many hours every day.
Right.
We
No, I agree.
promise we will come back with it.
I'm just saying.
I just wanted to clarify, will the staff absenteeism also include like bus drivers? Because I know that can really hurt us.
Yeah, it's gonna be very little.
Okay.
All right, Holly Day, Special Ed Director, is ready for the presentation on out-of-district placement and
Do you need this?
Chris, I shared it with you, so you can pull that up, please.
That's not
Chris-
Or Chanda, I
That's not
shared it with both
Chris's
of you.
computer.
I shared it with both of you.
Okay, hold on, can I get off for a second if I have to go in my email? I have not for public eyes things that come into my email.
Show Shanda's email.
That's not. Do I just unplug?
Yeah.
Okay. My email is not one of the ones that go public.
This is just a very short presentation, but I know there were some questions about it last week, and it is a very large part of the special ed budget, so I thought some information might be helpful for you.
Plug it back in. Will it magically do its thing?
It's thinking about doing its magic. There it goes.
So, that was like a little fun, everything you wanted to know, but we're afraid to ask. Okay, so I want to talk about who are the out-of-district students. How does the student get determined that they need an out-of-district placement? These are students we are unable to program for in our public school. The decision to send out-of-district is made by the IEP team, and it occurs after we have utilized all the special education and general education services, supports, and resources we have. It is the last ditch. It's our last resort. It's our last resort. I hate sending students out of district. We're separating them from their community. When we do that, we're putting them in a program where there's no typically developing peers to be role models for them. We're putting them in programs where they might learn even more behaviors than they already have. So it's really a last ditch effort when we have to go there. Just kind of typically, I don't want to really label or generalize, but students with autism who have very high support needs, those are some of our students who are out of district, and then students with significant mental health issues that are either unable to keep themselves safe or others safe around them. Those are kind of the two general groups of students that we have outplaced that we're not able to meet their needs. There's a couple of recent changes that impact out-of-district costs. The change in the state law to allow certain special education students to access public school until age 22. It used to be that the school year they turned 20 was their final school year. So say, for example, a student turned 20 on June 10th. They had that whole school year. Now, they would have 2 more, basically, full school years after that. So, and a lot of the students that need those extra years are our really high-need students, which may be placed out of district. So we're going to see these costs continue to kind of spiral up because the students will stay until 22 and we're not having that rollover to make room for some more kids, if that makes sense. There's also a recent change in the Maine Department of Education. We used to only pay based on the day the students attended. We know every student has some absences throughout the year. A lot of schools budgeted at 80% of what a full year would cost, just kind of guessing what they would have. Department of Ed said this isn't fair to the out-of-district placements. They're trying to run with a budget too, and they're trying to run their program. So now we pay for every day, whether our student's there or not. So that's a big change as well this year.
That's a big change.
Just wanted to give you, these are the 3 schools we're currently using for out-of-district students. So I just kind of wanted to give you, that is a daily cost for just their tuition. So it averages between 65 and 75,000 a year per child for the tuition. Plus, yes, we're gonna get to the plus. And those, by the way, those change yearly, and every single year they go up a little bit more. So Maine Care seed costs. So Maine Care won't cover tuition costs, but it will cover a lot of what we call the related services, like speech and language, occupational therapy, physical therapy. If they need an ed tech or behavioral health professional support, social work services, psychological services. This is not an all-inclusive list, but these are our common ones. So Maine Care will cover those related service costs. However, we have to pick up 1/3 of each cost for each student. To give you an example, Maine Care will allow a provider to bill up to $58 an hour for one-on-one support, because that's going to cover the pay to the person, benefits, administrative costs, etc. But we're then responsible for $20 an hour of that service that's coming out of our budget. And a lot of students have that kind of support 6 hours a day. So on top of that daily rate of $360, we might be spending another $120 just for their ed tech or behavioral health professional support, plus speech, OT, psych, etc., that 30%. So there's a lot of costs involved. I wanted to give you just kind of an overview of our district's outplaced students. So we currently have 8 students with IEPs in an out-of-district or special purpose private school placement. And just to give you some kind of general information, 2 of the students are 18 plus. So they very well may be there until they're 22. Those are students in the past that might have finished out or moved on. 2 of our students are currently state agency clients. It means DHHS is their guardian. When a student is a state agency client, the state of Maine pays for their tuition. But it's still work for us. We're still transporting the child. We're still running the meetings, doing all the paperwork, et cetera, et cetera. And a student could change, if guardianship changes at any point, and whoever in district is being their resource parent becomes their permanent adoptive parent or permanent guardianship, that student now becomes our cost. 2 of our students moved into our district this year with IEPs calling for out of district. So that's why it's kind of a wild card. You never know who's going to move in and what their needs are going to be. I wanted to let you know, this is heartbreaking, that a student who was recommended for out of district at the end of last school year, before I came on July 1st, is still waiting for a placement. Because it's so hard, placements are full, they have huge staffing shortages, and they don't have to take kids. So we have been trying to find a placement for this poor student all year long, and we get just about there, and then one of their staff members quits. And they hire a new staff member, we're just about ready to start, and somebody quits. So it's a really frustrating process, and for us, for the parents, for everybody. And one of the questions last week was regarding hiring the BCBA this year, the behavior specialist. We have not sent any new students or referred any new students out of district as of today. And I always have to caution because things could change. I got a couple of high flyers that we've got our eyes on and we're trying to provide a lot of support to, but that could change at some point. But we have not made any new referrals this school year so far. Any questions about that?
Well, so I'm gonna just connect the dots, right? Which is the new, or the outplaced students line item in the presentation last week was, sorry.
344,000.
Thank you, 344. So why, if we don't have new students being referred out, is it going up 344?
So we didn't budget for the 2 students that moved in.
Just wanna make
That's
sure.
2 of
I
them.
thought so.
And then, I'm honestly not sure if one of the ones that was waiting, that got placed at the end of school year after the budget would have probably already been gone through, was
So it's
properly
probably the
budgeted.
3 from last year,
Yes.
as well as the 80% to 100%. We used to budget all of them at 80%. So you take 3 new students and then topping up from 80 to 100 on the rest,
Yes.
there's your 344.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so while they're waiting to get placement, then they're here doing services.
We're doing everything we can, yes,
Everything
yes,
possible.
yeah.
Okay.
They're not
But
just
that's a
sitting at home,
change.
but, yeah.
Thank you all, that's very helpful for the context.
Okay.
You said we have 8 students in outplacement now, and I think initially you said that most of it is, most of them are autistic, and there was another designation that you had.
Significant mental health,
Okay.
yeah, and safety issues.
So those are the 2 main designations, were
Yeah.
there any others that,
Pretty much all 8 of our students kind of right now fall under those 2.
okay. How about our, the in-school students? Do you have a designation breakdown of those that currently have IEPs, that are currently working on them?
Well, that's something we should come back with. Yeah,
Probably don't have it.
I mean, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. I can
Well,
tell you about
designation.
21% of our students are identified with IEPs, but then there's such a spectrum within that range.
So there's learning disabled, there's various designations, that's the right word.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So, yeah, don't you have a roster of
Yes.
all the designations that you have?
Yes, I do, yeah.
So
yeah.
you're-
It's down on my bulletin board, but yes, we do have that.
I'm not sure if it's gonna affect any of our budget decisions, so we'll probably not. So this, again, we don't have a lot of control over these spends. We are legally obligated to make these spends, but I wanted to make sure that everybody understands what this spend is, right? It's a big number. This is, it's a short way to get to a big number, but we don't have a lot of control over it. While we have Holly here, were there other special ed budget clarification or context questions that you felt weren't addressed from our parking lot here? All right, seeing none, that was really helpful. Holly, thank you. I just learned something.
Don't remember which of these windows. Okay, one now. Stop sharing.
I don't think we really had much left. Budget timeline.
If you'd like to be reminded.
Right, so we're here, we have a couple of outstanding issues. Mostly they're data points that probably can come through by email. So at this point, right, we kind of clarified everything, right? What we want to do now is give some thoughts, some discussion, some context. All of these numbers will be real for, so let me first ask the question. Does the majority of the board feel like we need another full workshop beyond the discussion that we're about to have for 45 minutes to an hour if we want it? Do you feel like we need to schedule another meeting?
We don't know what we're gonna discuss yet, so.
Okay, we can leave that question to later, that's fine. Okay. I think it's possible we might need more discussion. In general, after this discussion, right, all of the context of our discussion and what the admin has fed back to us gets consolidated into the finance committee. The finance committee looks hard at all those numbers and comes back at that April meeting with a proposal from the finance committee based on the discussion and based on what the administration has sort of offered, right? So our opportunity right now is to give our thoughts, try to reach some consensus, try to sort of give the opinion of the board, and we also have administrative staff available to us if we feel like we need more explanation on any priorities that would go beyond the clarification and be more like the, I'm not understanding, or we'd like to hear more about the rationale. I have a couple of notes of some things that I would like to discuss, but I will open up the discussion right now for the board to start discussing. Who would like to lead things off? All right, well, we don't have too many burners. I will go first. Right, I would like to take the sort of opinion of the board on that SRO spend that we just saw. Remember from the presentation, it's about $150,000. It's not always $150,000. Next year we won't have the vehicle and equipment spend, so it'd be a little bit less. I think there is potentially an opportunity to privatize that position, do something like hire a, security and safety supervisor who would have many of the same roles and duties. I've been doing some research on it, and I would be willing to put together a sort of more formal job description proposal. But for instance, if they are retired military or retired law enforcement, thanks to the Patriot Act, a phrase I have not said very often, thanks to the Patriot Act, they're actually allowed to carry firearms in school districts, right? So we could have someone that has sort of the same response capability, someone who has some of the similar training, but someone who would be wearing G&G colors and would actually work for and report to our district staff, versus the contracted situation with the SRO where, we've had 3 SROs in 3 years because we don't have any control over who we hire. They just, they told us that it is by union the very last person in, so we get the rookie, each time. We don't have any commitment going forward that they'll stay with us. Many people have stories of great experiences with Officer Farrer or other SROs we've had in the district. We haven't been able to find that continuity, which really kind of sells me personally on the value of the SRO. I want the SRO to know our district, know our kids, know our safety plans, all that sort of thing. I think we might have more control of that if we were to privatize it, and I think it would cost less, right? I think someone who is retired law enforcement or retired military, they're potentially already, in their pension or whatever it happens to be, I don't think they cost the same as a, deputy at the Cumberland County. I don't want to go through all the work of making a formal proposal if that's like a non-starter for the board, so just with all of that context, do people have thoughts on, they feel like the SRO is a position we absolutely need to have, they're interested in exploring alternatives? Just wanted to put that out there as a discussion. Anybody have thoughts on that? Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, do you know what other districts are doing?
I've just talked to some of our surroundings. So places like Windham and Yarmouth and Greeley, they have town law enforcement. And what they've reported is they do feel like they have direct control of those SROs because they work for the town, right? So they don't have a different sort of employer. They're all employed by the town, they're all in the same budget. I've been talking to Dave Mulry, who just happens to be a dad on the baseball team, and he is a Yarmouth law enforcement officer, and we've just been talking about this. And he says this is a trend that he's seeing just in the law enforcement community, but I haven't done the research, and I could make that part of the formal proposal if people want this. But
I wasn't sure in the presentation. This would be not a district employee, this would be a contracted.
no, I think it would be district employee. Why do you like that?
Because you get more control, you fire them a lot easier. And I just don't, I just don't like a situation where we've run every darn thing. We can't fire a few things out that are better done by subbing things out.
We might be able to. My concern would be we run into the same issue where we don't have control of who the employee is. Right? So if we're contracting.
I don't like, okay, I want to hire you. If I don't like you, I want to fire you and do somebody I like.
What's different between that and employee?
It's kind of difficult to fire a union employee.
Okay. So an independent
I
contractor.
want an independent contractor.
Interesting.
I like the
Okay.
idea, but
I have not
An
considered.
independent contractor, not as a big employee.
I was thinking like hiring like a Garda guard or something you meant in terms of private. But a private contractor, that's something we could consider. Other thoughts, go ahead, Cole?
I say no because the liability is put all on the school district. That's a huge liability, an absolutely huge liability.
So just talk more about that, what do you mean?
When you have somebody carrying a firearm that is able to do the ultimate thing that we don't want to do, that's a huge liability piece. And that's putting a huge liability on the school district.
Whereas
As of right now, it is through a law enforcement agency, whoever that may be. That is why that is typically done that way.
Yeah.
The research you're talking about as far as ex-military people and things like that, that's something that started getting implemented a little bit here and there because of the, just like we see in schools, right, hiring.
Yeah.
So that was something that was developed. How that's working, I think you're gonna find good stories and bad stories no matter what, just like any other job out there in America, right? But where the uptick in that is more in the states that are now developing mandates that they do have an armed officer in school. Florida is a great example. Every single school in the state of Florida has to have an armed law enforcement officer. So just the liability piece alone is huge, and I don't know of any other district in the state, or even private as far as I know, that has that. You've got that. Also, that being said, liability as far as training goes, officers in the state they have to follow state of Maine guidelines, right? They have to be trained every single year, just like our teachers are. They have to be trained. So all of that falls on that agency. I understand. I mean, you look at the number; it is a big number. I don't doubt that at all. But you're adding a vehicle in there this year that we saw. That's a huge piece of that, right? And it's, again, you hire somebody on the street and you look at the cost difference, I don't think you're gonna see that big.
So I would think that the subcontractor would carry their own insurance, basically. I'm not sure, if there would be a problem with that. However, looking at the numbers, you're looking at $76,000 this year. I'm not sure you can hire a subcontractor for much less than that. And so looking from that perspective, even though I hate the car issue that they stick us with, the county does, I'm not sure it's feasible to have an unknown subcontractor. And there has been problems in the news in the past about these military and all that type of thing. So, what's the point getting rid of what we have right now? It seems to be covered, under the umbrella. And before they come back to us for liability, they have a lot of other layers to get to before they come to us. So, I think, it's more secure to keep what we have, is my opinion.
Other thoughts, Brad Garrett?
I don't know how I feel about subcontractor parts, I haven't thought about that. I do know how I feel about our relationship with the sheriff's department. I'm not crazy about the way our contractor service works, so we have no say in who the officer is. We're basically by contractors, the newest guy in, I understand, because you do, but that's not our problem. It becomes our problem. And then we get whoever this newest person is, whether or not they're a good fit, and whether or not they actually want to be an SRO. Look, I work in a district in a town, police department, where the SROs actually want to be SROs. You know, that's a position that the people choose to take, and they stay in that position a long time, and they get to know kids, generationally. I admire that. I mean, I don't think I would do it. But I don't like the way that our relationship with the sheriff's department has ended up. Do we need to replace that vehicle based on their use of it? We don't use the vehicle in this district very much. I mean, how many miles is the SRO putting on in district work? I'm not talking about Grace work, in district. Why do we replace that vehicle on their replacement side?
That's the contract.
Well, that's what I mean. I do think, regardless of presentations on contracted services, that the contract is up in the spring, later in the spring. I think we need to do a hard look at that and have a hard conversation with the sheriff's department. And if there's no, if that doesn't improve, then maybe we have to look for an alternative just based on that. Because I think this is too expensive. We have no choices. They don't last more than a year. There are no relationships built. No, there's no, I mean, and I understand, you know, you're new to the district. You want to go to the tech. That's your job path. I get that. But wouldn't it be great if we had a little choice to do help with the interview and maybe find somebody that actually wants to do it? Diane also mentioned that the salary fluctuates every year because we don't know what level the new officers were brought in or what their experience level is. So he may be new to the sheriff's department, like new law enforcement, because of 18 years of service, that's salary benefits and a family of 6. Or whatever, family of 3, let's just say they come in with a family package.
Can we screen them for number of children?
No, all I'm saying is we're not like,
No,
that's not part of
we
it.
don't have control of the spend. And
It's a dollar figure that we have to do every year.
And that's what generates my brainstorming is, you know, I don't like having no control of such a vital employee, and I don't like having little control of the spend.
Well, if we'd had more success, I wouldn't feel that. Success is better than I guess Sharon.
That would be interesting to know when it changed, because when I attended, it was an officer who wanted to be here and was here all, I was here when I first started, so yeah, it was about 40 years. So it would be interesting to know when did that change, because it used to be what you are describing.
Well, there was a time when we had no officer. And then when the grants came back out, that we rehired, there were federal grants that came out.
Thanks to the Patriot Act, we actually got a 3-year SRO, which is why we added the SRO back.
And then taken off over a 3-year period, so that was less than that.
And now it used to be the same person.
Right, what do you tell George Bush? And now, you know, it's all on us. But we have this relationship with the only law enforcement agency that's close by and wants to work.
So do we move to the town model?
We don't have time.
No. But we're not gonna add the town police force. I've got Penny and then Fran.
So anyway, that's.
Right.
I think really excellent points made by, on both the liability part and, you know, the upcoming contract. I'd be much more interested in seeing if we could revisit it at that point or revamp it with some pressure on how this person comes to us. I'm not really excited about guns at school. Even less excited about a gun at school that isn't in the hands of an actual police officer. That, you know, as a parent, there's something about that feels better to me than somebody we hired off the street. I'm not saying just like it, but I'm very interested in the relationship piece. That could be someone who could be, you know, build a community with the kids. I don't know if that's something we could demand.
We're not really in a position to demand. I mean, we've had something similar to this conversation like the last 2 years, and we say, we'd really like it if they didn't screw us. And then they do. So, you know, that's what's got me brainstorming. Go ahead, Fran.
I don't know how much has changed, but when we first started with having the sheriff cover the town, that was negotiable, you know, the covers for 3 years and that type of thing. So there was negotiations. You're doing a contract, and in contracts, it's always a negotiation. It's not a demand, like you just said. It's more, we're thinking about changing, getting someone else, blah, 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 and all that. And then that gets their attention, at least now you start communicating. I'm not telling you how to do it, all I'm saying is that I think that we need to approach this department and talk about that card, especially the very good point, it's not being used in our district, but only a few miles. And we need to find some kind of, and maybe we can get some help with people dealing with the sheriff's department, and negotiating. I don't know what level, but there are people who do that, and perhaps, I know beyond Diane, I should say, so that we can, that's the big bugaboo in that thing is the car.
Craig and I will make some phone calls.
I really do.
Yeah, I got it down.
Well, yeah, one last thought.
Yeah, well, two actually, one clarifying. Just so I think Diane hit it in the slide, but the car is used for the district during the school year, but it also does patrol in the summer. So it's not like it just gets parked at the end of the school year and then you pick it back up in August or September when school starts. So I understand the whole thing. Anyway, that's all I'm gonna say about that. The other question I have is, do we, I know in the past we did as a district, are we still contracting social workers? Do we still have a contract with any social workers?
What?
Social workers, contract any social workers? No, we all in-house?
They're not doing any BCBA social work?
We're not in contract with BCBA and social workers.
Yeah, I think we tried to do that. Yeah, it's on
One quick question on the code for community with CW. Maybe Cole might be the best person to answer this. Is there something that would prevent us from contracting in any case of municipal duty? Or do we have to go through the county?
That's something I don't know the answer to.
I didn't get your questions.
The question is, is the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office the only person who is contracting out potential SROs? Could we contract from Oxford Hills
Or Cumberland or Wyndham or something that's relatively close.
Yeah, I don't think we.
That's not allowed.
I don't, because I think that they're like,
They have to,
they're their own contract, right, with like the town or county that they're working. I don't think that they could go to a different county.
I'm not sure that they have, I don't think they have.
But not,
They have agreements. They have agreements with other municipalities.
or was it like an Oxford?
But they're using
Let's
it.
explore that question.
I had to use it for construction projects.
Right, no reason to. I think that was a good discussion. I appreciate that discussion. I don't think it's time to put together a formal proposal on that, but I think, we have some points of emphasis that we'd like to make, and we can do some exploration of, is there anyone else we can contract, or at least we could have some negotiating leverage, would be nice. Okay, thank you, I appreciate that discussion. The second discussion point I had is, we've seen the priorities that our administrators have given us in this presentation tonight. And we have made the point that some of these low priority items also happen to be not very expensive items. Of the items that have been identified in kind of those bottom two categories, would we like to hear from administrative staff about why they prioritize them that way? Do we feel like we have enough information on that prioritization? They're available to us now. This is our opportunity to hear more context there.
I had a question.
Yeah.
I forgot to ask it a while back, but it has to do with the map that's being offered. Have I asked that one already? I've said it so many times that I might.
The map that's
The
being
map being offered at the gun school and the memorial school. They seem to be under two map systems. One's presentation that was given to us a while back from the principal. And I was wondering, why did they have two different math programs?
So we have not presented any math programs yet. We proposed an English language arts program.
Currently, the one that's currently being done, there was, the
Yeah,
name
about
of
the
like
curriculum.
SPOT or something, and one school is offering a different math curriculum than the other schools, Russell and
So
It was
Russell and
given the
Memorial
presentation.
adopted the Bridges math curriculum last year. This is our first year of implementation, we purchased that for this current school year. Dunn School is currently looking at programs, Bridges is one of them. So that is a decision we will continue to work on, and we'll be bringing to the curriculum committee, I think we have that scheduled for May, Jim?
Yeah.
So then, an answer to how that flows from K up to 4, we can talk about at that time. At middle school, they have a program that currently exists. We are extending it for 1 year while we consider whether or not we want to continue it. It's a program that's being discontinued. So we have to pick something else. Eventually, we just want a little more time to consider that. The other piece I'll say to you about math curriculum, or any curriculum without trying to get too in the weeds, companies generally have programs specified for grade levels. So you're generally gonna see something that's K2 or K3, or you're gonna see something that's K5, or you're gonna see something in a really good, it's K6. Then you've got another program that's generally 4th or 5th grade up through 8th grade, sometimes it's 6th grade through 8th grade, and then 9th grade is another. So there is not a program that exists for math, I would dare say for English language arts, also, that you can purchase that goes K through 12. There is not one that exists. So that's why we have to look really closely at how they transition.
So can I ask that question in the committee meeting? I want more explanation on that, and I don't want
Yeah.
to waste time here.
Talk about it in committee too.
Pardon?
We can talk about it at the curriculum committee.
No, that's what I said.
Gary, I see you.
Question, I'm not sure if it's for Sadie or not. On the least critical list, is that gateway teacher? If that, why is that least critical? What are we doing to provide that service if that doesn't happen?
So, can I answer that? 'Cause I'm glad you noticed that.
Whoever wants to answer.
Yeah, so we actually, Sadie was like, what are we doing? We were not talking about getting rid of a gateway teacher in the high school. We do need both our gateway teachers in the high school. We were talking in our meeting about, combining 2 special ed teachers at the middle school level. One of them being a gateway and another one that perhaps there were similar students that fell combined into one classroom. So it's really kind of more reducing a middle school special ed position, not a high school gateway teacher.
Okay.
But the high school gateway teacher position is the one that is the add to the budget. So the bottom line is we would not be adding an additional position to the budget. Who the people are is a totally different conversation. That's the add to
So
the
we'd be able
budget that Holly
to
is saying is
provide
not
those
important.
services without adding a position.
Because she can move the
Because we
positions
move
around.
people around. So we're removing that additional line item from the ask, but we're not removing that job from the district.
I just wanted to make sure that that wasn't, that we weren't going to generate service. Because I feel like so often, a lot of the most vulnerable students end up, their services end up on someone's list. And I just want to make sure that.
Good question.
Those were one that we forgot to
I
mention.
got Jim here.
I got kind of a bottom line question, I guess.
Yeah.
This budget is a 9% increase from the previous year's budget, which we all know what happened with inflation last year or so ago. And if you do the math, we're, based on the projections, we're like 31 students less next year than this year. If you do the math, our gross budget number over our attendance, you get $8,800 per student. That's a pretty big number. We were about 16.9 thousand last year, based on that those two gross numbers. That's an 11.3% increase. I think where we're losing students and we're hiring more staff is not going to be that well received by some people, and I'm afraid that it could sabotage bond success efforts. just we really have to think about that.
100%. I think it is so what we've seen tonight is administration telling us that they have heard the message that the draft budget needs to get smaller, right? So the question is, how much smaller can they make it, given what we've talked about tonight? And I do think we should have some discussion. I don't want to get into like exact percentages, but I would listen to discussion on how important it is to get to a certain number. If you think it's important to get to a certain number, what we've always said as a district is we try to, each of these budget pieces are necessary for meeting our mission, right? But if people want to have a discussion where, I don't think I could put out more than X percent and, still support it, I'll listen to those discussion pieces. I don't have a number in my head personally, but when I saw the 9-point-whatever% of that first draft was, my gut reaction was, and I think a lot of us had a similar gut reaction was, I feel like the voters of Gray and Gloucester will feel like that's too big. And so I think that's why we're having some of these discussions. I don't think there's any frivolous asks that the administration has presented to us. I think it's a really tough year with this ESSER cliff and, with $344,000 of increase in just one line item for things that we can't even control. Plus, we've just negotiated 2 new contracts that both invested in our teachers and our staff, right? So we have a lot of hard pieces in there, and I still said, I don't know if we can put 9.6% in front of other people. I don't know if 7 I'm happy with, I don't know if 5 I'm happy with, or 8, I personally am not gonna pick a number, but if people think that, they wanna talk about it, I would listen to what they think is a number that, they can support. Do you have a number? I mean, I'm not putting you on the spot.
I do, yeah.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean,
what's the number?
I think we gotta stay, we can't stray too far from last year's increase.
That was 5.
I thought it was basically 6.
Yeah, 6%, yeah.
So, I mean,
So you'd like to be in the ballpark of last year?
I think if we're in the ballpark of 6, we can make it, and that includes 7.
17.
I'm not saying you gotta do 6. I'm reasonable.
7.5, 7.9.
I don't want to do horse trading at the table, but that's just, do people have thoughts on what we just talked about? I would hear Jason.
Not on that. I have a question about fire.
All right, let's stay on that topic just for a minute. Does anybody have thoughts on that? Go ahead, Tanya.
I'm glad we're throwing that out there because I actually don't disagree. My gut was like, oh, if we could do what we did last year, I feel like we could get away with that. When I poked at some of those smaller line items, it wasn't to be cheeky. I'm very uncomfortable saying we're gonna force the admin to take things off just to take it off when they know better than we do what this $2,000 thing makes a huge difference. It's crazy to me to cut that. I'm uncomfortable with us telling, getting that granular. It's hard to have this ESSER cliff in the new salaries and say we're not gonna talk about the fund balance. These are big things we have to face. It's hard for me as a simpleton who's on the finance committee to tease those apart. But if at the end we can get to a place where we're at around 5 or 6 and we're not nitpicking what the admin needs to do their job, that's what I'd like to see.
Other thoughts along those lines? Go ahead, Fran.
Yes, well, last night, if everyone heard, the town's budget came in and it's no increase. And of course, now it's all on the school board's shoulders for any rate increase. Based on last night's figures, my taxes personally will be $300 more in 1 year. That's really now, we're getting really out of line. That's crazy. And I'm not making this personal, obviously, but that's an example of what that means in real life. So we have to really, we really have to adjust the budget, the school side. Last year, Gray did not like the 5% increase, the Gloucester did. Who knows, maybe the Gloucester won't like the 5% increase in Gray would, who knows? But you know, the point is that, you know, there has to be some adjustment. I think in the finance committee meeting, I think we need to, get all that's been presented and shake out those numbers and see what we can come up with, and then at that point present it. But it's good to have a base, you know, people may be more receptive to last year's base, maybe. I don't know, let's see what happens when because right now we're just out numbers. We're not associating with anything, so we're kind of like, you know, like my desire to have to pay an extra $300 taxes. I mean, it's the same thing.
So I feel like, you know, nobody is an outlier here. I feel like we're all pretty much on the same page. I agree with the sentiment that's just been expressed. Does anybody feel like they have a wildly different opinion they'd like to express? Go ahead, Gary.
No, I wouldn't say it's wildly different, but I think we all, you know, instinctively, we have numbers in our heads and we think the community will support those. But at this moment in time, I'm not gonna commit to one because I don't think this is the time. I think we have to look at our job is to look at all the things that are presented and all the things that are put in the budget and take the best advice from our administrators. And sit and do all the diligence in the background to trim what we can. And if we end up at 7% or 7.5% or whatever it is, we knew ESSER was in. We settled those contracts in full knowledge that it was gonna add to the budget. That's on us. We settled and accepted those contracts with however many percentage increases there are, knowing it was gonna increase our budget. So we gotta own that. But I don't know what that number's gonna be. My feelings about fund balance also are like, yeah, if we take money out of fund balance to roll over stuff, the budget is still going up to 9%. Next year, we don't have the fund balance to do it. So we're gonna be covering this year's increase and next year's increase. That's the reality. You know, I mean, we could take that whole 9% and pay it with fund balance. And then next year, it's still there.
Next year it'll still be there, but we also don't wanna be a dragon hoarding our pile of cash, you know?
No, but it's not like we can't use that cash for other things separate from students' education. And that's the way I feel about it. I don't think I'm not at a point yet where I'm gonna commit to any kind of, or even suggest a number until we do a hard look at all the way through the budget, with all the numbers. And Diana Chandler can go back and provide us with all, because those little bits and pieces do add up. I mean, if we can get there from 9 to 4, if we can get to 8 based on bits and pieces, eliminations and cuts, that's a big piece. And then we start maybe talking about, you know, how prioritizing some things. Maybe there are a few things we can cut.
I'm also conscious of time, right? Like, on our current schedule, the next time we talk about this as a full board, at the end of that night, we vote on the budget. That's what I'm getting at, right? Is, you know, do we want to try to get a meeting on, it would have to be, what, April 17th?
I mean, this is the one thing that we actually are supposed to do.
Yeah. What?
I mean, well, as a board, this is our job.
But I'm just saying, is if we feel like we need to hear from the finance committee and have a discussion with another meeting before we vote, then, you know, just looking at the calendar, we basically got one Wednesday where we would be able to do that.
I'll take Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday.
Don't have to.
I mean, over the next month, if we had to take another night, I think it's plenty of time to start. We're not gonna like add a Tuesday meeting for the rest of the year. We had to add a meeting. I mean, I think this is the time to do it.
I'm going to table the added meeting discussion for 1 minute because I want to finish that other discussion. Does anybody else want to weigh in on that topic we were just talking about in terms of, you know, gut feeling on numbers and that sort of thing? You do, or you want to switch topics?
No, I want to just, all I'd like to do is reiterate what Gary said. I'm not comfortable with a number right now. I want to see, you know, what we can do to break it down first, and then see what makes sense, so we'll bring it down more. But I'm not quite ready for it, I think.
Okay. Greg, you have something?
Well, yeah. I think the admin team has done all it can do. I think a lot of thought went into, we started discussing the Esser Cliff in July. And that was the big organized discussion. We had been discussing it in general prior to that. And so we put a lot of time into prioritization of what we really need to keep from Esser. And then a secondary list, and then a tertiary list. And then there's the work that Diane has done. I'm not asking for a number, but I think if we're directed to come in with,
Numbers are helpful, is what you're saying.
the numbers are helpful, and, you know, I think we can present numbers to you next week about what we can get to. And like I said, we don't like to talk about the fund balance during the construction of the budget, but we know we have it in our hip pocket. We all know 9.4 is not palatable and maybe not even responsible. But if we have permission, we can come to you with a revised draft proposal that is much closer to what will provide our kids what they need and be palatable for the voting public.
Do we want to have that discussion at our business meeting on Wednesday? Take 20 minutes to review, you know, a numbers look at the feedback the administration heard today? Is that too quick, Diane?
I just want to have health insurance.
Right, we want to have health insurance,
I'll
sure.
have a
We never
good
do.
portion of it.
But, you know, you've heard from us on the priorities. Do you feel like you need more feedback on the priorities?
One other thing.
Yeah.
I think now that Fran said that the town has got their budget, usually at this time last year, we were kind of at the point of mill rate impacts.
Well, so for mill rate impacts, we have to make a recommendation on the revenue side. So that will come from the finance committee at that April 24 meeting. We would have the full recommendation. We recommend this, and that will result in this mill rate impact based on our budget, right? And then that would add to the mill rate budget in either Gray or in Gloucester for the total for each town. But without knowing how much we're rolling over, we can't get into what the mill rate is.
I guess what I want to have everybody understand is that all of us as Mainers is that Maine pays the highest property taxes as a percentage of personal income than any other state in the country. So when people are complaining, you know, it's not because they're anti-education, it's just that we have low incomes in the state. Other states pay higher property taxes, but they've got higher incomes in which to pay those, and we don't have that. So we need to be sensitive to those that sometimes it's very difficult to pay those property taxes. They come in, that's a pretty big chunk.
I don't think there's anybody here who's looking to pay more in property tax.
I have 5 properties, not great.
It's one of those
Place by a chunk.
Yeah.
We're getting a little bit of separation between us and second place.
Other discussion. Did you have something? There was something else that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
I think we can move on from that. I'm going to come back, circle back to it, but other discussion.
Are we having a meeting on this now? Other meeting?
We have not gotten to that yet. I think there's more discussion to be had before we have that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, so again, this was a question about priorities. So I see in one of the bottom two lists, the permanent substitutes. And we heard over and over in every presentation, which were important, kept from having to draw ed techs out of important work that they were doing to cover classrooms, teachers out of important work that they're doing to cover classrooms. And, you know, we've had difficulty with filling, because, filling it with substitutes in the past. So I'm just kind of curious why that is on one of the lower priority categories. If anyone can speak to that.
Okay, I didn't want to speak out of turn. So I think something important to note is when we come forward with the list of things we need, it's because they're all important. And we have sat down and we are very discerning, about what we report. We're very thoughtful about it, and when we say we need it, it was not a light decision. So then when we get to a place where we have to decide what's more important, what's less important, I mean, we're choosing between our children to a certain degree. So it's not that we don't think permanent subs are important, we actually think they're incredibly important, but if you're gonna make us pick between social workers and permanent subs, we're probably gonna go social workers. So that's sort of where that delineation in the budget came from, is, we feel strongly that those things we asked for is what is going to help us do the things that you have been asking us to do. We also get that 9% is not palatable. We totally understand that. So you sort of asked us to decide what it hurts the least. I mean, there's a reason we said the least critical.
And it is at the top of that category.
It's very,
I see that.
it's very,
But it was at the top of most of the presentation for each of the schools as well.
So,
I don't think position within the group necessarily.
well, I just want to say, I mean, after last week's meeting and after knowing ESSER's going away, we spent Tuesday talking about the 9.4% not being palatable. We have to make a priority list to pass a budget. We don't think we can do that at 9.4%. So I didn't ask the administrators, I told the administrators, you need to make a decision on what it is that you absolutely need and what it is you would have to sacrifice to get that number lower. And not a pleasant exercise. I've had to do it twice, maybe 3 times as a superintendent, but they worked really hard, they thought about it. Everything we brought to you we could use, but there are limits as to how much money you can spend. And as a superintendent, I'd like to keep the budget increases as low as possible. Because maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years, something terrible is going to happen, and I am going to need to go to the voters and say, I need 9%, there's no other way. And so
I was, say it as, if we had questions as to why certain things were in certain categories, that was one I had a question about. I was just hoping to get a little bit of rationale as to why. That's all.
I think the other thing I would add to that as well is that the reason it sort of fell in the middle is because I think it's more crucial to some schools than others. We could get to a place where we started to parse out, these 2 schools think it's really, really important, these 2 schools think that maybe it would be less important. And we can get there in the process if we want to, so that's also part of the reason it fell in the middle, is it was sort of a little more, I don't want to say all over the place, a little more prioritized by different corners of the district, so in the middle of.
And I think some of the numbers that you were talking about, in terms of the selling situation, may help answer that question.
Yeah, I remember when we were sort of brainstorming how to deploy the ESSER money. We kind of came up with this idea of the permanent substitutes. And despite pontificating I've done on, ESSER really meant to be a response to COVID, we probably should have had permanent substitutes all along. A floater position just takes so much stress off of the administration, which we already know is a little bit, we're in that weird spot where if we had 100 more kids in a certain school, we'd probably have an assistant, but we don't. So to be able to have our principals and our administrative staff to be able to have at least one person they know they can deploy into a critical area if they have an unexpected absence, I feel like that's a really valuable spot to have. That's going to be something that I personally support continuing.
I agree, and again, it helps reduce the amount that we have to hold, ed techs and other people from doing important work that they need to do, then I would be supportive as well.
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about trying to use, student impact as our filter, and like that, those seem like positions to me that impact a ton of students. Broadly applicable. Almost every student probably benefits in some way or shape or form. I had a question, Chris, on the pre-K technology refresh.
Oh, I was just gonna ask that.
So, one of the reasons that we're doing the refresh is because we want to be able to sell off the devices and monetize them and not have them go into worthless category. Do we risk that, and does it end up maybe being a wash because we won't be able to sell them if we keep them for another year? Or just give me a little context on what happens if we keep those devices?
So the valuation would go down. So
can you come
out? Sorry. So yeah, the valuation would go down on those devices. So we would have to consider that if we were to move forward with purchasing the pre-K devices in an upcoming year. We wouldn't get as much money back for those devices. I think the other thing to consider too is that they won't have any kind of warranty at this point. So fortunately, unfortunately, they don't get used as much in the classroom, but we need to consider on remote days, if anything was to happen to those devices, like I need to make sure I keep money in our repair lines to cover that, because it would be a full cost on those devices as well. So there's a few different areas that it could kind of add up if we were to move forward with the purchase in the upcoming year as opposed to this year. So.
In terms of the amount of money we'd be saving, it's basically a little bit less than 1/13, just because the pre-K is in a full-size class.
Yeah, so we did the math. It's about 47,000 roughly spread out across 4 years. So it's about 11,000-ish over the next 4 years.
So $11,000 a year if we were to keep these devices rather than refresh them.
Right.
No.
Well, 11,000 over the next. So if we were to purchase, that's what the cost would be.
We would save 11,000 by not purchasing this year.
Correct. Right.
And so we would save slightly more than that for, like, say we didn't purchase K through 5, it would be 5/13 of the number you gave us at the refresh.
Right. Right. I mean, but again, we would have to consider kind of the ramifications of not doing a buyback. And then we also have to consider too that we're right now receiving a discount from Apple, which is about $850 per 10 iPads. So we may lose that if we decide to push this off.
Right.
So there could be more expenses by pushing this forward.
Excellent. All right, good. That's good. I mean, for me, we have to be able to go remote. We have to be able to provide instruction to every kid on a remote day. I don't know how we get around it. If we could reuse those devices, they get the least amount of use, they might be the least likely to need repair, they might be the devices we want to take that risk on, but then if we can't sell them and get $300 a device on the back end, I feel like it might be a wash.
Right. Right. It would save us money this year, but could potentially cost more money.
Yeah.
So my parking lot question that I had asked last time was how much is related to pre-K and K for the cost of their computers? I didn't get that figure for tonight.
So So pre-K, we did do the math on, so that's 47,000.
How much is it?
47,000 roughly. I could get you an exact
Over
number
5 years.
over the next.
Jinx.
Sorry,
It's
maybe we should just
only-
leave out the total.
5 years,
Yeah, so it's 11,000 in the upcoming budget
Right,
I got you. For each grade?
for pre-K.
for pre-K. So pre-K, we allowed for 90 devices plus some extra spare devices. So kindergarten would be a bit more than that, but I'd have to get that number.
Well, but something important to point out though is kindergarten is not included in the local budget. We're paying for that out of other funds.
Right.
Oh,
So
okay.
in that local budget proposal, kindergarten, first grade and second grade are not in there.
Right, those are MLTI.
Right.
So it's really,
That's a
pre-K
different
is the
funding
only
source.
money that we
Okay.
would spend, so it's 11 grand.
And our devices are like refurbs from other grades, but different version of iPad than grades.
Right. We're gonna move MLTI to the K1 too, so that'll create a rotation that the state covers.
So, and the last question on that is, it's used for remote learning is the reason for having it. But how can you have remote learning if the power is down? And usually if there's no school, the power is, it's because of, the storm and,
I don't think that's.
what's that, how much impact is that on,
So I have a couple points on that. The first
Okay.
is that remote learning is one reason.
right,
The other reason is K through 11, that is the system we use for our assessments.
For
And
your
that is for assessments.
okay,
That is part of our state required testing in grades 3 through 10 and third year of high school. And in K through 2 is our baseline screening testing that we aren't required to do specific testing at that level, but we are required to have screeners. And so that's the majority of our screeners. So that is the other very key thing that we use devices for the entire district, is that is what our assessment system is based on, and we have to give those assessments electronically. We do not have the option to do it in writing. So, very important point. The second point about the power, I think, is a really good point. That is part of the consideration that comes into whether or not we're gonna have a remote day. If we have a day where we're having a remote day because a significant amount of the district, or even a good portion of the district, is without power, we don't call a remote day for exactly what you're talking about. Because if the kids don't have power, they probably don't have internet, which means it's sort of irrelevant to have a day. So when we're having those considerations about what a remote day looks like, that is something that comes into play.
I hate to really ask this question, but, does pre-K really need computers? I mean, computers have always been part of my life, but you really need them in pre-K? Is it really healthy? I mean, I guess it's not healthy for kids to have too much screen time. I mean, what am I missing here? I hate to get sick in the mud.
It's just about delivery of services, and, we heard from Jeff that they rarely use them during the, actual school day, right? It's not so much they're using their computers, it's their way of zooming in to the class on a remote day, right? So they're not necessarily using the computer like in an app type of thing, it's their way to see their teacher. And it's the only way we can provide that. And so when, having the ability to have a remote day can save us a lot of money on the back end by not having to go past Juneteenth and not have to,
We're talking pre-K, I mean, kindergarten, I mean, that was just basically.
But we can't provide a school day to all but one of our grades. We just can't do it. As much as I might agree that, school day for pre-K is like playing with blocks today, like that's not a legal thing that we can just do. We have to provide class of instruction for each one of our kids, like that's the law,
Pre-K is the law.
Well, I think if
have
they
it,
are
if
in
you
our
have
school
it, it
system.
is, yes.
Yeah.
Every place has pre-K now?
No, you don't have to have pre-K, but if you have pre-K, then your pre-K has to follow all the laws.
But it is coming, we will have to have 3 to 5-year-olds.
Someday, it will be.
It's gonna become a public school requirement. Let's not forget, serve 93 K students, which state subsidy.
And when we gave the presentation, I saw that it was a huge line item and really late, and I didn't bother to ask questions.
I might philosophically agree with you. I just think we, have legal obligations that we need to be able to meet. Go ahead, Danny.
I was just gonna say, it is super painful, but like during COVID, I had a tiny one and we got speech therapy because of Zoom. So there's some services too that kids can access that aren't even, that you can still meet with like a provider. And it's awful.
Yeah, my kids were.
You can say you did it.
And it was very important.
I appreciate that, because it's not really, I don't have kids in the district, and it's just one of those, it's a blind spot for me.
I know.
It is terrible.
Yeah.
But I think considering not upgrading it, being able to Zoom with a refurbished machine is, I think, doable. So that could be something. I mean, I don't know if it's.
That's kind of how we were trying to consider first that decision.
All right, that was good tech discussion there. It is, so it's 8:40 here. Are there other topics that people feel as though we have not addressed that they want to address? So my impression is that if Diane has the time, thinking about what I have on the agenda for the business meeting on Wednesday, I can't, unless Craig's gonna surprise me with like 7 huge topics of discussion, I can't think of it being so full that we couldn't take 20 minutes of continued budget discussion within the context of the numbers coming back, given the administration has heard all of our discussion, and that would give us, I think, enough time to then have the finance committee do the discussion. Then we would have a full 2-hour workshop and we would vote at the end of it. That feels like enough time to me. Do people feel like that's enough time? Adam's nodding his head. Is there anybody who feels like that's not enough time? All right, seeing none, I think that's the plan. Do you comfortable with that?
So what I anticipate giving you is a new bottom line budget number and a list of reductions that I took with a column that you can actually say, yay or nay.
Correct.
Clean.
Yeah, we can do a little straw polling, say, is this something we were comfortable with or not comfortable with? Maybe we can have people sort of make their case for objections, then the finance committee takes that information and gives us a final recommendation. And then we'll have a whole
I'm not bringing
workshop.
back any of the other parking lot things at this time. It's gonna be.
No, just what we
kind of
talked
number
about.
thing,
Yeah.
these are the items.
Right, and then we'll have, 20-minute discussion on just those numbers, and then finance committee makes a recommendation, and then we'll have a whole workshop to argue those numbers further, and then we vote at the end of that workshop. Everybody good with that?
Finance on the 10th, the finance committee, that's on the 10th.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that'll give us a week between the business meeting and the finance committee meeting, and then we'll have like 2 weeks from then until the budget. All right, speak now if you object to that, or hold your peace. Oh, Greg, would like to object.
I'd like to leave with you.
Okay.
So we have the priority list, the question priority list. Do you want us to go back and reconfirm the priority list? Because
No, I think you've just heard our discussion on the priority list, right? I think you've heard some talk of some people thinking, like, I appreciate that, for instance, the, permanent subs are, 1 tier down, but, we've seen the impact of that, and maybe we'd like to see those kept, or, so I think use your best judgment based on our discussion here. And then, we'll have a couple of leaders in between.
all right, we'll relook at the priority list Tuesday to make sure people are comfortable with it. And we can make it smoothly.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Administrative staff, you guys think we're doing anything stupid? You want to speak up top?
You sit here behind closed doors.
Speak now.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for